No phone calls, no messages. Nothing but junk mail and overdue bills to keep me company. Seems nobody wants to hire a real private dick anymore, a professional like me. A guy who does the detective work nobody else wants to do. A guy who wears hats and walks around in a black and white world. I began contemplating a more profitable line of work, like politics.
We are the show you want to know. It's time to talk to you.
All right, folks, good afternoon and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and for the next hour, you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Lines are open and available, and we do have our text line at 617-297-8388. 617-297-8388. You can text that like anybody else. It appears on the screen here in studio in real time. We try to work it into the conversation. The station does stream 24/7 to the TuneIn app, like thousands of other radio stations do. And that means you can take us anywhere, and that's a great feature. And you can watch as well. We're streaming to the station's Facebook page, YouTube channel, as well as my social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, Rumble, X, Twitch TV, LinkedIn profile, Facebook. They're all there. All right, a lot to talk about. A lot has happened, actually, in the last day. I want to thank John Deaton for joining me yesterday, learning a little bit about him and his campaign. Some interesting twists there in a second, but the search still goes on for Nancy Guthrie, and a lot of activity in the last, 24 and 48 hours has happened here, and they're doing this extensive search in the foothills, and now a third email over to Harvey Levin in the TMZ person apparently asking for 1 Bitcoin to give information on who wrote the original. So that's kind of strange because it's kind of extortion. So why do a criminal when the reward's $50,000 to come forward and say, I think, and you get the 50 clean? I don't know. None of this adds up. But I was watching the video over and over again, and it occurs to me, and if you haven't seen it, go look at it and let me know your thoughts. You can message or text or whatever, or call the station. I think this person in the video has a prosthetic right arm or right hand. If you watch it closely, it's in a grip that never moves, very much posed as a lot of prosthetic hands would be. And the way it's hanging from his body and the way that he uses it, the fingers never open. The hand itself never moves. And if that is the case, that would be a huge help, would it not, in narrowing down the ID of a person? Go look at the video. Let me know your thoughts on that, because I think, I really do think that could be an actual prosthetic hand, or maybe even a prosthetic arm. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. So what's interesting is Massachusetts Auditor DiZoglio filed a lawsuit complaint with the state's high court yesterday. And if you remember, John Deaton talked about filing suit to force compliance with the voter-approved audit law yesterday, 24 hours ago, on this show. Shortly after we got off the air, the news breaks of DiZoglio's filing. Now, in John's words, it was to bring a glimmer of sunlight to what's really happening on Beacon Hill. Well, and here's the headline story. State Auditor Diane DiZoglio has now gone to the Supreme Judicial Court, too, suing the top legislative leaders to force them to comply with the 2024 ballot question. That was question 1. And John and I talked about that yesterday, where the voters passed it at 72%. Let that sink in for a second, because in Massachusetts, when 72% of voters agree on anything, it's not a squeaker. That is a mandate. That is a voice loud and clear from the people of the Commonwealth. That's not ambiguity here. That's an unmistakable message. Open the books, show the receipts, let the public see how the machine does operate. All the nooks and crannies in this thing. And what's the response from the political class on this? Usual. Refuse, delay, lawyer up, hide behind the process. And according to reporting, DiZoglio says she notified leadership back on January 3rd that her office would conduct and perform an audit of the House, Senate, and joint committees, and then requested records like the budgets, the audits, balance forward transactions, and settlement agreements. And I would love to see the settlement agreements. And I really think that those should be available to the public. It is taxpayer money that settles these agreements, is it not? We saw this years ago. Remember the story broke with the federal Congress? In the number of cases, I mean, most of them, unfortunately, were sexual harassment cases that were settled with taxpayer money. So I would love that they, through discovery or through the audit, and it could be through discovery if this turns into a court case, which it looks like it will, the settlement agreements for fiscal year 2021 through 24. The complaint says flat out, defendants have refused to produce the documents. What happens if you receive a request from the government to produce documents and you refuse? There's a process there for sure. You don't get just to do this. I mean, we saw Bill and Hillary respond to a congressional subpoena with, here's our statement, we're not going to show up, we don't need to do that. And then quickly found out that they actually do need to do that. And look at what she says the audit is aimed at. This is not a fishing expedition, though. See, it's exactly the kind of things taxpayers should demand scrutiny over. And that would be things like contracting and procurement. How are the contracts assigned? How are they issued? Procurement contracts. How does the Commonwealth procure services and goods? Taxpayer-funded non-disclosure agreements. So an NDA by taxpayer funds. See, it goes back to, I think, a very simple principle. If it's public money, taxpayer money, transparency travels with that money. When it's taxpayer money, I don't think there should be any non-disclosure agreement that your NDA you can hide behind, because it's the money that belongs to everyone in the Commonwealth. So we're party to that, are we not? And then balance forward spending. That's the kind of line item that can become a black box if nobody's watching it. So she's very specific on the things she wants to look at. She knows what she needs to look at to get the picture. That will paint the picture for sure. So here we are. The voters authorize audits of the legislature. The legislature essentially responds with, no, I don't think so. We're good. Now Beacon Hill leaders claim this would violate the separation of powers. John got into this in detail yesterday a little bit. That the auditor auditing the legislature is constitutional even after the statute was amended by the voters. They do not want us looking under the hood at all. So who does have the powers? Or are they really, really claiming we are beyond power? We are beyond your authority. We are beyond the people's authority. Is that what they're really saying? And you've got the Attorney General's office in the middle of this. DiZoglio's filing criticizes the AG's office for not bringing enforcement action. And Andrea Campbell fires back that the auditor does not have the authority to file this lawsuit and says the auditor hasn't answered key scope privilege questions the court would require. So let me translate what the average listener hears. Everybody in power has a reason the public can't see the documents. Everybody in power has a reason it has to be slower, narrower, later, studies, clarified, referred, reviewed. And somehow, mysteriously, the thing that never seems to arrive is transparency. And that's why John Deaton's move matters and why his appearance on the show yesterday mattered, because he was talking exactly about this right before this broke. Because Deaton didn't just talk about the politics, he talked about the enforcement. The same reporting notes that Deaton filed his own suit at the SJC with taxable inhabitant plaintiffs, arguing that refusing the audit amounts to unlawful spending of public funds. And then he turned up the heat with what he calls a democratic accountability and transparency squeeze, arguing federal officials to pause certain non-essential discretionary federal grants until Massachusetts complies, while carving out protections for things like SNAP, Medicaid, and emergency services, which is a smart thing to do. Now, you can debate the tactics and you can debate the tone even, but you cannot debate the central point. If the government is spending your money, you're entitled to know how. It's not much more complicated than that, is it? Not trust us, not check the website, not we'll already have private audits. Well, private audits aren't the same as an independent performance audit with documentation and production and scope defined by public mandate. Here's the larger takeaway from Massachusetts on this. This audit fight has become a stress test, not just for DiZoglio, not just for Deaton, but for the entire Beacon Hill culture. Do elections and ballot questions mean what they say? We saw the legislature ignore us with the illegals getting driver's licenses. Does 72% of the electorate actually matter? Or do the insiders simply decide that the voters got it wrong and the law only applies when it's convenient for them? Because if the legislature can exempt itself from oversight, if it can refuse document production after a landslide ballot vote, then what you're watching is not good government, it is protected class. And my friends, is exactly why people are disgusted, why people feel unheard, why more and more taxpayers are done playing the role of ATM while Beacon Hill plays by a different set of rules. So here's my message today. Open the books, comply with the law the people passed, let the sunlight in. If there's nothing to hide, prove it. If there is something to hide, that's precisely why the audit must happen. All right, folks, we have to take our first break here on the Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show at AM 830 WCRN. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. We'll go to the phones right on the other side. Stick with us 2 minutes, 10 seconds, and we'll be back, folks.
Life is full of changes. Some we choose, some we don't. But how we handle change, that makes all the difference. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and I'm bringing you Handling Change, a brand new show here on WCRN. Every week, we'll tackle life's biggest challenges and profile a local business or service that can help you navigate them. From career shifts to health, finances, and family. Whatever life throws your way, we've got you covered. Don't miss Handling Change. Thursdays at 10 a.m. on Radio Central WCRN 830 a.m., where New England comes to talk.
Join us for the Jesus is Our Shepherd broadcast, airing on this station. During each broadcast, Pastor Ray McMahon shares the truth of God's Word on the subject of the unbreakable covenant of marriage. You don't want to miss this opportunity to hear clear and concise biblical teachings on this subject. The Jesus is Our Shepherd broadcast with Pastor Ray McMahon.
Join us for Jesus is Our Shepherd, Sundays at noon on AM 830 WCRN.
93% of adults listen to the radio each week. Of those exposed to radio ads, over half made a purchase. Despite how often the media reports on newer forms of advertising, it is, in fact, free broadcast radio that most effectively reaches and truly influences customers. Radio allows you to place your company's message directly to the radio audience for 30 or 60 seconds, and it's a gold mine. Radio advertisements are more memorable compared to written and visual ads. It's just this simple. Sound is stored more effectively inside memories. Reach over 90% of this market's potential customers with your radio message on WCRN. Call 508-870-5803, extension 222, 508-870-5803, extension 222, or visit WCRNradio.com.
All right, folks, welcome back. Second segment, Wednesday edition here, the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central. Reminding you, you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. Let's go to the phones. Mark has been waiting patiently. Hey, Mark, what say you? Mark, you there?
You hear me all right?
I do now. Go ahead, sir.
All right, good. Diana DiZoglio. She's a very intriguing woman to me because she's a registered Democrat. Well, technically, she's got a D after her name, and she's taken on what she perceives as being the crooked system, which is the system that she's technically a part of because she's got a D after her name. That's the first interesting thing about her. And I applaud her for having the guts to do what she's doing, because not very many people do. They can talk the talk, but they can't walk the walk. But she's the exception. That makes her exceptional. Now, what I would, I look at her, the status quo, the state as it exists. I mean, the state house, not how it was 20 years ago, how it's going to be 6 months, as it is right now. She looks to me, as far as the Massachusetts Democratic Party goes, as she's toast, politically toast, as of right now. In other words, in essence, her political career within the state house is pretty much toast. She's kind of like kaput, as the Germans say. That being said, I don't understand why she doesn't take her D, turn it to her R, declare herself as the Republican candidate for governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Like the Romans used to say, fate favors the bold and seize the moment. And that's what she ought to do right now. That'd be my advice to her.
I think, Mark, when she was a staffer years ago, she actually was a staffer for a Republican rep. And I think she represented Methuen at some time. Here's the thing, and I've always said this about Massachusetts politics, because I was a candidate on the Republican ticket many years ago, is a lot of people, I think, in Massachusetts, regardless of where they are on the spectrum, decide to run as a Democrat because they want to get elected. Thank you for the call, Mark. I appreciate it. And I knew back then, I could point to so many registered Democrats who were, by all means, would have been considered Republican if you looked at their positions on things. And I think this is a situation with Diana DiZoglio where she's using common sense and she's looking to make sure things are above the board and laws are followed and things like audit. I mean, she became the auditor of the Commonwealth. And she's just trying to do that job. And the fact that look at what we're looking at. If you are trying to block an audit, we all realize, whether we're consciously realizing it, that anyone who's trying to block it is probably Democrat in this state. And that they're trying to hide things like the non-disclosure agreements and these budget line items and things of that nature. What does that say about the Commonwealth? And what does it say about us that we continually vote by party, not by person or by positions? And she would, because of this, she would never make it in the Democratic Party beyond this. Like she should run for governor. She'd never make it out of the convention. And if she becomes a Republican, it would be signing the death warrant to her own political career. She's good where she is right now. I hope that she continues to fight. I hope that she's successful in this because she's just trying to do the right thing, really. So I don't understand all of the flack for this, and John Deaton didn't either. But we need to support this woman. We did support this woman, actually, right? We gave her a 72% passing on the ballot question about the audit. I mean, that's pretty clear support that we, the people, want this to happen. I don't think that's vague in any way, shape, or form at all. So good luck to you, Mrs. Auditor. I hope you are successful. Follow this lawsuit through. And John pointed out yesterday, and this should piss us off as the taxpayers, because they're literally using our taxpayer money to fight the referendum that we passed at 72% saying, yes, we think Diane DiZoglio, auditor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, should conduct this audit and should look at the budgets, the audits itself that they have done, the balance forward transactions, the settlement agreements, and for them to just say, no, we're not going to produce any of this. And their suits, as John pointed out, and with Diane DiZoglio, it's the clerks who aren't complying. Now, the clerks aren't complying because they're being told by leadership in the House and the Senate not to comply. But those clerks have to decide what is their job. What's their job? And then if they're seeking legal advice on how to go on this, who's paying for that lawyer? Is it really their lawyer? Or is it lawyers on behalf of the legislature being paid by taxpayer dollars? But what would be interesting is if we were to give them the money to contract or to retain a lawyer for them personally, meaning the clerks, what would that advice be versus the lawyers that work for the Commonwealth, i.e. being paid by the taxpayers by the legislature? I don't know if that came out clear, but I think that the lawyer whose fiduciary responsibility to their client with private money, say, for these clerks, might have a different opinion than the lawyers being paid by taxpayer dollars under the instruction of the House and the Senate leadership, if you follow what I mean by that. Just as a side thing here, I wanted to bring on, I didn't do it at the top of the show because I wanted to get into this lawsuit with the taxes. You know, yesterday we heard that somebody was detained. They were very careful to say, when it comes to Nancy Guthrie, right? Very careful to say, not a person of interest, they're not arrested. So apparently it was a DoorDash delivery man that they wanted to talk to, but they have released him after the FBI detained and questioned him in connection with Nancy's disappearance. So that happened. He was pulled over by police. He was taken into custody or detained, questioned, and apparently they don't think anything's there. So that one, you know, they got somebody, but they were very careful yesterday. I watched a lot of the news during the day, and they were absolutely very careful to say this is not someone, they're not under arrest, and they're not a person of interest, but it was a DoorDash delivery man on this. They're searching the foothills. Something else has come up. They've gone back to the daughter's house a couple times. I go back to, and I'm looking at this, if you go look, especially that one when you got the full body, look at the right arm, the way it's angled, the way he moves it, and the hand. I'm telling you, when this is done, and it sounds like it's getting closer and closer, it'll be interesting to find out if that hand, because he uses the left hand for the flowers and everything, and the fingers never open up on the right hand. And I'm telling you now, I won't be surprised if it turns out to be a prosthetic hand and or even arm, the way it's hanging on the body. So y'all know how I feel about voter fraud and IDs with elections. Well, my friends, you know, do you have to wonder why so many Americans have lost confidence in our elections? And listen to what's unfolding in Georgia. I brought it up, the Fulton County FBI seizure that happened last week and the warrant that they had, which means that they were able to prove to a judge that there was enough there to show that there probably was some kind of crime. And they had exact request on the warrant what to grab, because this is exactly the kind of thing that should have never happened in this country. And as the news was reporting on that FBI affidavit that was unsealed in federal court tied to the search warrant and the seizure of the 2020 election materials connected to Fulton County, in that sworn affidavit, Hugh Raymond Evans, he's an agent assigned to the Public Corruption Squad. And he writes that some of the allegations were disproven, but some were substantiated, including through admissions that the FBI is investigating whether any improprieties were intentional acts that violate federal laws. Now, here's where this matters. The affidavit lists specific deficiencies or defects the investigation is focused on. And that would be things like the missing ballot images. Ballots scanned multiple times during recount. Listen to that. Ballots were scanned multiple times during the recount, which is why I have to chuckle whenever they say, well, it was recounted 5 times, Joe, and it's still nothing. If you're recounting fraudulent ballots, and if you're recounting ballots that were scanned multiple times, there would be no change in the outcome. You got to go back further to the fact that what was originally counted was erroneous. Doesn't matter how many times you count bad information, you're still going to get the same result. Why is that a hard thing to understand? Then the inaccurate batch tallies reported during a risk limiting audit. Reports of absentee ballots that were never folded or creased, and even a recount total that changed by tens of thousands from one day to the other. So even though that happened and they say, oh, they recounted it, even on the recounts, there were still discrepancies of 10,000s or thousands by the tens of thousands on the recounts, which means they didn't duplicate the repetitive scanning exactly like they did in the first place. But we have to take our mid-show break here on the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. I'll continue with this on the other side, but we do have to take a break. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Text line 617-297-8388. Stick with us. We'll be back in 2 minutes, 10 seconds, the second half of the Joe Mangiacotti Show.
Time now for the forecast from the Boston Independence Group Weather Center. Call Jerry Doherty today at 877-772-1776. Retirement is within reach.
I'm meteorologist Sherry Spear, and here's the latest Boston 25 weather on Radio 830 WCRN. Expect a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon. High temperatures upper 30s to lower 40s. We'll see a little bit of melting during the day today. Later this evening and tonight, there might be an isolated snow shower coming through with a little coating in 1 or 2 communities. Most of you will stay dry and drop back into the 20s. High tomorrow looks like 35 degrees, and for Thursday, we're going to keep it mostly sunny. I'm meteorologist Sherry Spear, and you can hear Boston 25 live for the morning drive weekdays on AM 830 WCRN.
More live and local radio is next. Stay tuned to Radio Central 830 WCRN.
Boston, are you ready for a show that's unique and different? Blind and Beyond Radio Show is the only commercial radio show in the world for the visually impaired and the blind community. We are the bridge between the blind community and the sighted community. This show is sponsored by Carroll Center for the Blind in Newton, Mass. Fun, informative, educational, with trivia prizes every Sunday night. Starting February 1st, Blind and Beyond Radio Show every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. on WCRN 830 a.m.
Caring for an aging parent or spouse can be overwhelming. That's why there's Florence, Floor, the AI companion built for busy families. Floor listens, remembers, and helps with reminders, medications, and staying connected. It even offers friendly conversation to ease loneliness. With Floor, families enjoy fewer worry calls and more peace of mind. Seniors feel supported every day. Sign up now at florenceai.com. ai.app or contact Phil George at charter.net.
All right, folks, welcome back here. The second half of the Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Lines are open and available. I'm talking about what's going on in Fulton County with the affidavits, the warrant, the seizure at Fulton County, looking for specific things. And let me say this again, that missing records, duplicate scans, inconsistent tallies at a minimum, it's a chain of custody and record retention nightmare for them. And the FBI is looking at whether it crosses the line into criminal conduct, regardless of whether it's changed an outcome. And that's a good point, whether it's changed the outcome or not. And that's the question, right? Because I heard that stupidity argument, right? With well, there wasn't enough fraud to change the outcome of the election. So what are you telling me, that 12% fraud is acceptable, 18% fraud? Like, what level of fraud is acceptable to you? To me, it's not. We should be looking for 0% of fraud when it comes to elections. Elections are the basis of the entire way our elected government works as a republic like this. Now, on the other side, we'll say, and you'll hear this everywhere, that previous reviews found disorganization, but no evidence of fraud big enough to change the 2020 results. In Associated Press reports, the affidavit itself notes uncertainty about whether the defects constitute crime and highlights prior reviews, saying that it didn't see evidence of fraud affecting the outcome. Fine. Sure, we'll grant that distinction, but here's my question. Why are we accepting sloppy and disorganized as normal when we're talking about the sacred act of voting? Why do Americans have to settle for probably fine? Not that much fraud. They didn't mess up too much. And that brings me to something I've said for years. Voter ID is common sense. It's not voter suppression by any means. It's not controversial in any other area of life. You need ID to fly, to buy certain products, to open bank accounts. And yet we're told elections should be the one place where basic verification is somehow offensive. The hypocrisy is all over the place. We watched them set up those stupid ICE checkpoints, right? And they wanted to check your ID before they let you drive down their street in their neighborhood. Finally, the Minneapolis police came and dismantled those things. Remember the Chaz? And of course, you have to have ID to go into the Democratic Convention. You need ID to go into the Capitol. It's just hypocrisy. It would take us days to list all the examples of the hypocrisy of that. Now, be honest, voter ID doesn't fix every issue described in that affidavit by any means, right? Because we have missing images and duplicate scanning and administrative and system problems. But voter ID is part of the same principle, prove eligibility. And that's what this SAVE Act is about. That you have to prove your citizenship, that you're an American citizen, naturally born or naturalized. It doesn't matter that you are a citizen when you register to vote. And I'm okay with that. I don't think registering to vote should be a box you check on your license renewal or when you get your license. And I am against, and I'll reiterate why, the idea of automatic registering people to vote. And I don't believe in that because you're registering people who barely even understand that they're being registered. I think registering to vote should be a deliberate act one must take. I think that they should want to be sure that they're registered to vote because they intend to exercise that right. And they take an effort to do it because they intend to use it. And when you register someone who couldn't be bothered, wouldn't have the effort or gumption to go register themselves, and you register them, you have just loaded one in the chamber. And what do I mean by that? You've registered someone to vote who clearly didn't take the time, effort, or consideration to go through the effort of registering themselves, which means you have that vote just out there to be used and maybe not by the person it's registered to. So stop with the automatic registering. Registering thousands of people who could care less if they're registered is not a victory. It's a formula for fraud, folks. So I don't believe in that. I think you should have to have a little effort because you intend to use it. And if you go through the effort of registering to vote, there's a good chance you're going to get your butt down there and vote that day. So prove your eligibility to be able to vote should happen up front, day one, at the registering, not a box clicked on a license renewal form. That you have your birth certificate on or your passport or something to prove it. The process needs to be a secure process and preserve the records. Because when the process gets loose, trust does collapse. And when trust collapses, the whole republic starts to wobble. It is that important, and it is that important to the foundation of our republic, meaning the voting and the integrity of the election. And it does wobble if that is not a secure thing. And remember this, the FBI affidavit says the probe originated from a referral by Kurt Olson. And Reuters notes the broader context here. This is all happening in the shadow of the 2020 fight between Trump and Joe Biden. So where do you land? Well, I don't care who you voted for. I care that every legal vote counts. And whatever that is, it is what it is. And that system is transparent enough that ordinary Americans don't have to just trust the experts. Where has that gotten us? I mean, I could get into a whole diatribe here about COVID and trust the experts and the masking and the 6 feet and all that stupidity that was junk science and made up. But sunlight fixes this. Clear rules fix this. Clean records will fix this. And yes, ID at the ballot box is part of fixing it. Because the nation can't run clean elections in a nation that can't keep faith with its own people. It has to keep faith with its own people. It's just the way it is, folks. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Lines open and available. Reminding you the station does stream to the TuneIn app, which means you can take us anywhere. And that's a great feature. And you can also tell Alexa to play WCRN, and she'll do that, no questions asked. So, my friends, if you want to know when the political class is running out of answers, watch what they reach for. Because Mayor Michelle Wu, and we don't talk about her a lot, and probably I should talk to her about her a lot, being in our backyard here and all. And the Mask Fiscal Alliance let out a press release criticizing Mayor Wu's endorsement of a statewide rent control ballot question, warning that the proposal would worsen the Commonwealth housing crisis. That's true. And this is a woman, right? You've been listening about her in the news because Mayor Wu has publicly lined up behind the statewide rent control ballot question. This is his one-size-fits-all rent cap for the entire Commonwealth. And I understand some people think, oh, rent control, rent cap, this is a wonderful thing. No, time and time again, it's proven to be worse in the long run. And let me tell you what the signals are. Desperation, no compassion, no competence. Here's what they're trying to tell you. We'll make housing affordable by telling landlords what they're allowed to charge. Sounds simple, right? Fair. Sounds like government can just pull a lever and fix the market. And we're seeing it hasn't worked out for Mondami quite that way yet. Days after he takes over running on a campaign of free buses, the bus fare goes up. The first snowstorm they have really pissed off New Yorkers because he couldn't get the streets cleared. So let's put a pin in all that. So we'll make housing affordable. We'll tell landlords they can do this. We just may, wave that magic wand and it'll be all set. But we've seen this movie before, haven't we? The proposed measure would limit annual rent increases to the CPI or 5%, whichever is lower. And it applies broadly, totally regardless of the local market conditions. They're not even factored in. And what happens when you cap prices in a market where supply is already choked? You don't magically produce more housing. And that's the solution, obviously, more housing, or creating housing availability by removing people who shouldn't be here vying for the housing in the first place. But, that's another conversation. So you don't magically produce more housing. You don't conjure up new units. You freeze the incentives that get housings built, and you maintained in the first place of this, right? You get fewer upgrades, fewer renovations, fewer new projects. You get owners converting to condos, pulling units off the market, or simply deciding Massachusetts isn't worth the headache. That happens also when you have businesses who are overregulated and overtaxed. They decide the same thing. Massachusetts isn't worth the headache. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, as they say. And we've seen companies move out of Massachusetts in droves. I mean, meat processing market just closed with ending 200 jobs in Springfield. So yes, some people who already have an apartment might get a temporary break. But the next layer is brutal. New renters pay more, availability gets tighter, working families get punished with the scarcity of inventory, and if you doubt the cost, gets shifted. Let's talk about the hidden bill. Look at what's being argued in Portland, Maine, where rent control has been cited as shrinking the city's taxable property base. But we're against the clock, but I'm going to finish this thought out about this rent control mayor rule and what's going on. But we do have to take a third and final break here on the Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show at AM 830 WCRN, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is 617-297-8388. Stick with us. We'll be back 2 minutes, 10 seconds. Don't go anywhere, folks.
WCRN, where the left and the right meet in the middle. Whether you lean left, lean right, or just want to stay informed, WCRN has you covered with diverse voices, lively debates, and thought-provoking discussions. You'll hear it all right here. Radio Central.
Junk piling up, garage bursting at the seams. It's time to call in the mighty at Mighty Movers. They don't just move, they remove. Their junk removal and clean out services are the fastest, easiest way to reclaim your space without lifting a finger. Whether it's yard waste, old furniture, garage cleanouts, or even hoarder cleanup, they've got the muscle and the mission to get it done safely and affordably. Selling your home or just tired of the clutter? They do offer full property cleanouts, demolition, and furniture delivery too. One call clears it all. Proudly serving Marlborough, Boston, Worcester, Framingham, and beyond. They're Central Mass's cleanup crew with a can-do attitude. Call 978-793-6165 or visit mightymoversma.com. mightymoversma.com. Mighty Movers, they bring the might so you don't have to lift a thing.
Dr. Satya Mitra has journeyed from a childhood of poverty and homelessness to a successful career as a financial advisor, motivational speaker, and community leader. Now inspired by his guru, he uses his experiences to positively affect the lives of underprivileged people. We strive to house our blindness, poverty, homelessness, female empowerment, and good citizenship initiatives within the Joy Guru Humanitarian Center. If you wish to contribute or know deserving persons or initiatives that could use our assistance, please contact us at 508-641-8441.
head over to ZT's with your Valentine. You both deserve a fine Italian meal with money left over for flowers. ZT's Trattoria of Metro West, Turnpike Road, Westboro. Ah, ZT.
All right, folks, welcome back here. Fourth final segment on the Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Let me go to the phones. Ken's waiting patiently. Hey, Ken, what say you?
Good afternoon, Joe. I had an issue, sort of a leftover from last week to bring up.
Okay.
Because I called two different shows on this topic, and wow, the reaction was about the same. And it was, whoa. You remember there was a clip with the president talking to Dan Bongino on his first day back to his job, and he used the term federalizing elections.
Mm-hmm.
And the left media went nuts. They can't do that. And they, were whipping out the time, places, and manner. That's the local state that do that. You can't do. And then it hit me. It's like, and I asked a simple question twice to the two hosts: was motor voter federalizing elections? Their heads almost exploded. Oh, how they don't know the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4. Where basically outside of time, places, and manners, the federal government can regulate and describe the procedures of a federal election where we elect House and Senate members and the president. But, hey, who cares about the truth? Let's propagandize. Make people, he's doing something he can't do. No, the truth is the SAVE Act is very, very within the Constitution. And the federal government and the Dems have done it plenty of times in the past. But just show them what they've done in the past. And no!
Well, Ken, I see a pattern here with a lot of things in the second Trump term. And it seems to me that he has decided that he's going to move fast and plow through in a lot of things. And yes, he's decided I'm going to use executive orders, but two things are going to happen. I'm going to try to hope that the legislature codifies these things. But the second is he knows darn well that suits are going to be filed. And I think what he's done is gone to all of the lawyers that he has access to some of the top legal minds in the country when he crafts these executive orders, because he tells them to war game this out. Make your argument. What are the legal arguments when this is in front of the Supreme Court? We know that they're going to shop it at the appellate court and the lower courts. They're going to shop it around. They're going to get an activist judge who's going to put the squash on this. That's part of the calculus, I believe. They know that. They count on it because they want to appeal it to get it to the Supreme Court, and that's where their arguments, based on the executive orders that they war gamed out, and then are made. And what do we see? We're seeing majority of these things when they reach SCOTUS are codified at the Supreme Court level. And I really think this was part of the process or part of the plan that he decided how he was going to do things in term 2 with that 4-year break, or the Joe Biden halftime show. So that I think is what's going on here. And so when he comes out with these things and he says these things, I'm pretty confident that their legal arguments for being able to do everything have been locked and loaded for quite a while. What say you?
Well, in this case, this isn't even going to be a legal issue whatsoever. Oh, yeah, you could have a judge try it. But then again, all we're talking, here's the thing. Let me put it back into the context of a little more than a week ago. Literally, conservatives in D.C. were getting all set to really bang the drum on the SAVE Act. And the left was going out of its way to not even talk about it. No, don't talk about that. No, stop. Is talking about everything but. And all that Trump did was the same thing he did in going to Europe about Greenland. He moved the Overton window. And when I said that to the two hosts, that really set them off. No, he didn't come. Yes, exactly. He wants a particular topic. He uses the term federalizing elections. He knows they're going to go nuts, and he gets them to talk about what he wants to talk about. Namely, we need to change the rules. And we have the power to, and there's no reason why the Republican Senate shouldn't be doing this. And light a fire on the Thune. Let's get it going. Let's get the old-fashioned filibuster.
I agree. Trump is always look. All you got to do is go read The Art of the Deal. Go watch him. Even on the early years of The Apprentice, you see how he works. You look at the Mar-a-Lago purchase. I know I've covered that in the past, right? Because Meriwether Lee Post left it, and she wanted it. It fell to the government owned it, and it kind of fell in disrepair. And then they were trying to sell it, and he came in with an offer. I'm talking about Mar-a-Lago, folks, and they rejected his offer. Well, the thing about it is, it's on the intercoastal waterway, so it had ocean view over here and ocean view over there. So Trump bought the lot between Mar-a-Lago's property and the water. And he said, I'm going to build a multi-story property there, and it's going to ruin your view. They ended up taking his offer, or was it $5.4 million or something like that at the time. And then he added that lot to Mar-a-Lago, which is why it touches two sides of the water. And he's done that kind of thing. You brought up Greenland, same thing. He constantly will go way over here because he wanted what they settled for all along. So he never asks what he wants. So I understand, I agree with you. So now, getting voter ID in shoring up elections could be the end result from federalizing elections, which is not what he was interested in the first place anyway. But the fact that fraud exists on all kinds of levels all over the place in the machines that count them, I don't understand why voting machines are connected to the internet to begin with. I don't understand what the controversy is about voter ID, and I certainly don't understand why it's an issue that you need to prove that you're actually a citizen of the United States when you register to vote. How could that be a bad thing? Unless you want the sloppiness, unless you want the vagueness, unless you want all of these I don't know, avenues to cheat in place. Otherwise, why would you be against it? And I know they try to make it a racial thing, Ken, right? Well, a lot of blacks don't have IDs. And when that people get, especially the black community gets offended, then they try to say, well, certain economic, stratosphere people can. And it's like everybody who's a functioning member of society has an ID. And I'm okay with saying, you know what? If you don't have an ID, I think we, the taxpayers, collectively would say, we will give you an ID for free. I mean, what it costs to give it, not $200, but the $4.50 it costs to make an ID for you. But that's going to require us to make sure we know who you are, right? Which you bring your birth certificate or your passport down to the city clerk or town clerk, and you get an ID, or you go to the RMV, right? We issue IDs to people in the car, or in every state does, that aren't licenses, right? You can get a Massachusetts ID, not a driver's license, but an ID. Everybody has one. Everybody walks around with one. So I don't understand why that's a problem, but I understand what you're saying. Trump's tactic at play here. So where do you think the SAFE Act is going to pass? Are we going to have this?
It's simple. You have to have 50 votes in the Senate and John Thune willing to push it. And I think there's enough time. It'll keep building. Bottom line is the public, these so-called independents, just need 30 seconds with two issues. Deport illegal immigrants and require IDs at elections. You win on both, you win for a long time. That's what scaring the death out of us.
And don't forget that the census and the other thing, again, there's always multiple things going on. And the other thing going on at the same time is Trump saying, and I agree 100%, that people who are not legally in the country should not be counted in the census. Now, I'm okay with counting them in the census for purpose of understanding just how many people are here illegally. But when it comes to calculating the Electoral College in the congressional seats, you have to base it only on those people that are actually American citizens. Those are only the people that are the constituents that can vote that person in. And we should be allowing people who are not legally here, therefore, by that extension, if they're not legally here, they're not able to vote. They should not be calculated in the formula to determine the seats that state has. Only the number of people of eligible voters should determine that number. And if we do the census that way, Ken, that will reduce, for a lot of these states, yes, mostly blue states, the number of congressional seats, therefore the number of Electoral College votes they have. And it could increase some of the more or considered red states because the way the population will shift. Not so much that people are actually physically moving, although we do know a great number of people are moving out of the blue state of California, but just by calculating or counting those that are legally here will change, will have a population shift. And again, not that physically people have moved, it's just that when you count and you count the census the way it should be, with only citizens being counted for the Electoral College, will the population shift in all the states? Final thought before we have to hit the clock?
The 26 midterms are vital. The 28 presidential is for all the marbles.
Absolutely. Ken, thank you for the call. Appreciate it. And it is. And I know traditionally, look, the numbers, history is not on the Republican side, not on President Trump's side for maintaining control of both chambers. Maybe contain, the upper chamber. They might keep the Senate. I know that. Statistically, I know that. Tradition, I know that. Historically, I know that. So what they have to do, and the only thing that could save them is the tax cuts coming in, the policies kicking in, GDP being maybe 5%, all of these things in low employment. All right, folks, wraps up Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. That will do it for me. Back tomorrow afternoon, same bad time, same bad channel. Have a great evening, folks. Go out.